Is Oregon's NIL keeping their class together? And what's next for the Ducks from the transfer portal?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the Portal Podcast, where you get your daily recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal news. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day. And today we're going to talk all things Oregon Ducks. They keep Tradarian Ball in the fold, and they also have some questions going into the transfer portal cycle, which gets ready to open here in a couple of weeks. And to help me figure all of that out, there he is, that guy, the Duck Man himself, Spencer McLaughlin. Spencer, I know everybody's still going to recruit him, but anybody that's watched Tradarian Ball's film understands why people kept coming after him. He's from Texarkana, Texas, goes to Texas high school, and he is shot out of a cannon, bro. I mean, he is just flat out shot out of a cannon. Forget position, forget size. If you told me he would only play corner if he came to my school, I'd say fine. If he was going to play receiver, I'd be fine, whatever. But his stop and start ability, he's had to have been a kid that's been in track forever, the way his first step is. Like, he's been trained and he's just naturally twitchy. So he shuts it down after Miami had him for an unofficial. Do you think this is a product of Oregon ponying up? Because the new trend, as you and I were just discussing, keep your guys, whether it's on your roster or in your recruiting. You think they ponied up more? But why would a kid go visit Miami and then shut it down?
Well, because obviously he knows that Mario Cristobal left the wrong school, and he wants to go to the right one. That was hanging out there. I could not throw that in there. But Brian, stop me if you've heard this one before. A smaller track explosive guy who's going to Oregon from Texarkana.
Well,
that ring a bell? That's going to ring a bell for a lot of Oregon fans out there listening who are watching this, because that's kind of what comes to mind. Now, is he the second coming of LaMichael James? I don't know. I'm just saying those two things. I can't hear Texarkana without hearing Brent Musburger's silky voice go through my head saying, there is the young freshman from Texarkana, and watching LaMichael James break a 40-yard touchdown run against insert opponent here. So I look at what Ball brings to the table, and he is different because, to your point, there's positional versatility here. I mean, he could line up at wide receiver. He could line up at running back. He could be kind of a gadget guy. He could do everything. Like, really, he's listed as a running back. I get that's probably his primary position. It seems to me, and I'm wondering if you feel this way as well, it seems to me he's the kind of guy that should be listed as athlete rather than just a straight running back. Just because he can do so many things on the field. I get that primarily he probably lines up the backfield, but I don't know that he's a guy who, can become a LaMichael James, who's a primary ball carrier and gets the ball 25 to 30 times in a game. I don't know that Oregon's ever going to need him to be that guy with how they've stacked talent at this position. But I mean, he is one of my favorite film watches for Oregon in the last couple of years. He is crazy dynamic, explosive. Like, the 26 class combined with 25, I'd say my three favorite films are, well, I'd have to think it through, but three of my favorite films are Ball, Decorian Moore, and Nasir Wyatt. Nasir Wyatt is and what all these guys I think have that makes them elite prospects, they're so twitchy. They're so twitchy. And speed is one thing. Speed is great. Troy Franklin had great speed. Tez Johnson is twitchy. That's the difference. DeAnthony Thomas was twitchy. Those are the sorts of athletes that I don't think come around a whole heck of a lot. And when you get a guy like Decorian Moore that combines high-end speed with twitchiness and great athleticism, that's how you get the number 1 overall receiver prospect in the country. So yeah, I love Ball. He's one of my favorite players in this class for the Ducks. Kendra Harrison's in that conversation as well because he plays basketball too. But yeah, I'm pretty bullish on what he can bring to Oregon next year.
So I think that the NIL factor is a part of it, but I think, well, Michael James going there, and I'm just going to throw this out because everybody talks about, well, Oregon's just got big NIL. That's not how this works. Your relationships still are the bottom line. The NIL at the end, if it's close, kids will pick the school that they feel more comfortable with the relationships 9 out of 10 times. Oregon has done an incredible job for a long time. Obviously, Mario was there before this staff, and Lanning's a great recruiter too. So that's first off. But I'm guessing they did drop some money for him not to take any more visits. And why not? Keep your class together. And to put it in perspective, anytime I watch a twitchy running back or somebody that's fast, I know this is before your time, but I'm sure you've seen video at some point. There has not been a faster guy that I've ever seen in college than Raghib Rocket Ismail. This kid's not that fast. He was sub 4.3 out of high school. Like he ran 4.3 as the end of his sophomore year of high school.
I don't even think those guys are around nowadays.
That's what I mean. Like he's as rare as it gets, but that's whatever. This kid, there's a next step up from that. And he's in that really, really small group. And he's a kid that's just going to get faster. He hasn't found Oregon's weight room, which we all know, if you go look it up, is impressive. They've got a pretty darn good track.
Did you see what Javon Holland said about that recently?
I'm afraid you're going to tell me because I don't know how you can surprise me about Oregon's weight room at this point.
Yeah, so Javon Holland, who was a great player for Oregon and is a great player in the NFL. I think he recently signed with the Giants, but he was drafted by the Dolphins. And he was asked recently about, playing at Oregon and going to the NFL. And he said basically, I went to college at Oregon. We had all the stuff. I got to the Dolphins and was like, dang, this is the league? Like, this is what your facilities are? Dang, man, we had it better off down at Oregon with all the toys and tricks and everything. And basically said, it was nicer at Oregon than it was in the NFL. And by the way, Oregon is not the only college that has that because, the Ducks were at the center of the facilities race in the early 2010s, before, I guess the uniforms were technically first, but before NIL, before the portal and all this stuff, like the facilities race was a huge recruiting tool that I'm sure you remember schools were investing in their facilities to separate. Now everybody's already there, and it's something that you have to have or else you stand out in a bad way.
Yeah, there's a handful of schools that's a little different. Georgia and Oregon are probably the 2 best facilities from what recruits have told me, and I don't think that would surprise anybody, and it does matter.
I bet Texas is pretty good.
I haven't seen anything recent with theirs, and of course they've done all the stuff at the stadium here recently and everything. I'm sure they put out video. I just haven't seen it. Yeah, but highly doubt Texas or Texas A&M for that matter are missing out on any facilities. So because they keep one-upping each other because they hate each other so much. But that's another story all to itself. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Oregon culture and bringing in players from the portal. Do they need some to make a run in the playoff this year? That's what we're going to talk about next here on the Portal Podcast. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need, delivered fast, coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/trade/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies just with a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. This show is also brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. When you start using Monarch, you can use all the different things that it has and keep everything in check, like your food delivery and all the little things that add up to cost you money. And you can keep everything in under one roof with your partner as well. Personal accounts, set goals, and stay on track with everything. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off of your first year. Let's talk a little Oregon culture. One thing that I've been fascinated with is Oregon probably pays more than anybody, especially when they're recruiting in the South. They're not going to get Southern kids. I live down here to go all the way out there and pay the same as most of those schools. That's most of the time. Their locker room seems to be good. They were undefeated last year. There doesn't seem to be any complaining going on. What is it with the culture? Before we get into the NIL/portal stuff, how does that work? Why is it so good under Lanning? You got any stories or any background for it?
Well, I think you touched on it in our other segment, where it's not just about NIL. Oregon, I never try to, sugarcoat or hide the fact Oregon's a tier 1 NIL institution in modern college athletics. They are rarely going to get outbid unless they truly don't think that a kid or a particular position is worth what someone else is willing to pay. But typically, it's an old school way to lose a recruiting battle if Oregon doesn't get someone. Typically, like there are a select few number of examples out there, but for the most part, Oregon's able to pay what kids are looking for, and that's an absolute benefit. It gets, twisted into a negative by fans of other teams. A lot of the times I deal with that sort of interaction a lot. Like, oh, they just have all the money. Like, yeah, that's kind of, yeah. And Josh Pate made a great point about this one time, that anytime someone, craps on Oregon because of Nike, Lanning's just got to sit there and go, thanks for promoting my program for me. Yeah, we're Oregon. We have Nike. If you are concerned or you're wanting NIL opportunities, we have that for you here. But that is not the only reason anyone ever goes to Oregon. I'm sure there have been some kids that have. I don't know who's who. I do know, and Lanning flaunts this regularly, as he should, because in today's world, it's pretty darn impressive. In his 3 full seasons with the Ducks, they are yet to lose a starting player to the transfer portal. They have not lost one yet. Now, will that go on forever? I don't know. But I know that Georgia just had their quarterback hit the portal, and that's one of the best programs of the last 20 years.
Damon Wilson also left too, their best pass rusher.
Yeah, like it is really uncommon for that to be the case. And I think it speaks to, yes, Oregon is highly competitive in the NIL space, and they can focus on retention. When Ohio State does it, it's like, oh, they're doing the right thing. But when Oregon does it, oh, Nike, Phil Knight, boogeyman bad, no good, very bad Oregon. So I think that what Oregon has also done a good job of is presenting kids with a very clear path of what their expectations are. There are kids on the roster right now, Brian, that frankly, in the spring portal window, I won't be surprised if they end up leaving, but I'm still kind of surprised they're around to some degree. Just because they've been around for several years, they're good enough to see the field, but they're not. But guys tend to stick around. That's not to say Oregon hasn't had players transfer out of the program and go have success. Harrison Taggart a couple of cycles ago, he's now at BYU. He's having a great career with the Cougars. Dante Thornton went to Tennessee. He's probably going to get drafted in the NFL this year. He was a good receiver for the Vols for the last couple of years. Like there have been examples like that, but there hasn't been a player transfer out where you go, wow, this is some big giant need all of a sudden, because he was going to be a start. He was going to be an 800-yard receiver. Those guys have stuck around, and maybe it's whatever, is in the wonderful Oregon water that is in Eugene and everywhere that I'm a big, some people think I'm crazy, for bringing this up. Water does not taste the same in every state. It doesn't. No, Oregon water. Thank you. I'm glad you agree, Brian. I'm really glad you agree.
Go to Florida. Look, it's not good.
Go to California. I can't drink the water that comes out of the sink there. Heck, I live in Utah, and it's got to go through a Brita filter for like straight out of the tap. No, not doing that. Anyway, so there's something about what the coaching staff communicate to players that resonates with them to trust and believe, hey, if I stay here and stay the course, I'm going to see the field. I'm going to have that opportunity and have my moment to be a major contributor. So I think the staff, to your point, are really good at building relationships, and that should not go overlooked in a world where NIL and the portal are a thing. And they often go hand in hand where, hey, you're in the portal, we can offer you this much money. I also know, and I wasn't the one that reported this. It was somebody else. I forget who. I could look it up if you want me to confirm or think I'm just pulling stuff out of my rear end. I assure you I'm not. But someone had reported that Dylan Thieneman actually had bigger financial offers. Certainly he got plenty of money to go to Oregon. Not trying to argue that. But he had reportedly bigger financial offers to go play in the SEC, decided to go to Oregon instead. What's that about? Relationships and probably brand power too. I think there is something to Oregon's different, Oregon's cool, Oregon's flashy. Some people are really drawn to that. I mean, there are Duck fans who didn't necessarily go to U of O that are all over the country. They're all over the state of California. Or, I've got listeners on Locked On Ducks that are in New York, Texas, all over the place. And I think there's something about that also has to be alluring for guys to go play. And it also doesn't hurt that since Dan Lanning got there, they never won fewer than 10 games. I don't think that's a bad selling point either.
Oh, that's a really good one.
Yeah.
That's a nice ending point.
I think kids like winning. As a competitive person myself, I prefer to win. That's just me.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that, my friend. In regards to that, we're getting down to the nitty gritty with Jared Curtis. I just want to throw this in there. Do you think Oregon has to make, I've heard the offer for Oregon is substantially more than Georgia. Georgia's not a top tier. That's not because they don't have it. That's because Kirby doesn't like it in terms of a locker. Like, it's a different personality thing. And it is what it is, but it's closer. So I always kind of thought he would go to Georgia. I've been around Jared. He's a nice guy. He's from a blue collar family, a Christian family in Tennessee. Do you think they would go all in? Because you and I have talked about this before. Not like their depth chart at quarterback stinks by any means. Even after Dante, they're in a good spot. So do you think the culture wins out, or they got to really overpay to get him? I just want to make this a point before we go into the portal.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up his background, because that affects a lot of these decisions as well. Some guys are going into the portal or coming out of high school saying, who's going to write me the biggest check? And right. I know that people don't like that because it's not typically what college football has been about and what high school recruiting is. And I understand that sentiment. I also understand if you don't come from a place of significant or stable money and suddenly you can, get $200,000 a year, whereas that place was only going to offer you $50,000. That might be more money than you've ever seen in your life, depending on who you are. Now, I don't know Jared Curtis's parents. I don't know Jared Curtis personally, but I mean, that is, I think, a decision for him. I don't get the sense, based on everything that I've heard about Oregon and the coaching staff, and also what they've been able to pull off on the recruiting trail in the last several years, that the only thing he would see as appealing with the Ducks is NIL, and that it's bigger than Georgia. I think there have to be other considerations there, and the comparison between the two programs. Look, Georgia's got plenty of off the field issues right now that also don't relate to him necessarily. I mean, that I think you've made this point on my show before. That might be something that drives the parents away more than it drives Jared Curtis away. Because what's Jared Curtis most concerned about? In no particular order. How much am I going to get paid? When am I going to play? Who's going to develop me? What kind of talent can you put around me? What's my path to the NFL? What are the parents most concerned about?
Can I see my kid quickly? It's always distance is a quick one.
That
And
yep, that
my
one.
kid's safe.
Yeah.
You know?
Are you going to take care of my kid?
100%.
That has to be, no matter who the parents are, there's no way that concern ever falls outside of the top two. Are you going to take care of my son? So if that conversation gets elevated, and I don't know why Kirby Smart hasn't been able to figure out in the last several years, I don't know if Oregon uses that as negative recruiting or not. It's gone on long enough at Georgia that it's not something that can be ignored. You can't just say it's not on their minds or Jared doesn't know anything about it. No, he's heard about it. It's just a matter of whether or not it matters a ton to him or to his parents, where I think the most negative aspect, I think, could be the parents, because it has continually happened and there have been so many problems. But at the same time, from a parental standpoint, like, hey, we raised this kid. By all accounts, he's a good guy, and those other kids have made those mistakes, but our son isn't going to do those sorts of things, even if given the opportunity. So that's the other side of the coin that could come into it too. But, a good selling point for Oregon, at least as long as Will Stein is there, he's put together back-to-back Heisman Trophy finalist quarterbacks. Nobody else in college football has done that. Not a single other person. So as long as Will Stein is there, I think that is a strong selling point too.
That is a very good point. And that leads to this. To finish up here, we've talked about this a little bit. What position or positions, if you had your druthers, would they add a player in the portal from the spring window, which I think is April 16th is when it opens?
15th or 16th, yeah, middle of the month. If
you had to pick one or two, what would it be and why?
Well, linebacker is the easy first one for me, because you've got two high-end guys in Bryce Betcher and Devin Jackson who are veterans or on the defense last year. I think you're really good with those two at linebacker. After that, you do not have a single player that has ever even been a rotational guy in Power 4 college football, or Division I college football for that matter. Now, you have a trio of redshirt freshmen who are really talented, and who Tosh Lupoi, defense coordinator, has said, NFL traits, we just got to get him, moving in the right direction. And then you've got Jerry Mixon, who's going into his third year already with the team. Wasn't a super highly touted recruit, but has been around, and he's one of those guys that I could have seen transferring out by now. He's waiting for a reason. He's still here for something. Maybe it's he doesn't love his long-term prospects, and Oregon's as big of a school as he's ever going to get to, or does he know, hey, this is my time to shine? But if they go through spring ball and determine, don't know if the young guys are quite ready, don't know if Mixon's it, or if they just want to have a depth piece. I mean, you need 4 linebackers, at least 3, but really you need 4, because I would hate to be in a situation, if you're the Ducks, where one injury to Bryce Betcher or Devin Jackson has you relying on someone as a starter who's never played meaningful snaps over the course of a season.
Yeah, I don't see that being what ends up happening.
So that'd be number one. And then number 2, there are a number of different spots. They kind of already added a veteran defensive back, Kennedy, the guy from Ole Miss, who's fine. He's fine. Maybe they add another roaming safety to pair with Dylan Thieneman on the back end. Maybe. But I think the second most likely position, honestly, it could be offensive line. Because
they're just hard to find. That's the only thing.
Not as a starter, as a depth piece.
Okay.
I know who their first 5 are going to be. But after that, Janoris Wilson's a backup. Davey Uli's a backup. Okay, that's 7. That's a good number. That's a good number of offensive linemen. You're like one injury away from suddenly being a little thin. So maybe there, but I think linebacker's the only one I'd describe as a need.
That's fair. Spencer, tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
Locked On Ducks, Locked On College Football on YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts, however you're consuming this show, my shows are available there as well. Brian is a frequent guest on such programs because, well, he just likes me that much.
Okay, I'm not going to comment on that, but you can find this show on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and wherever you get your pods. Like and subscribe. We will see you again soon.